Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday. It's 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and it is July 22nd, 2024. I am joined today, as I always am, by my effervescent colleagues. Radio Free Mormon, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much, Rebecca, and good job on getting the date correct.
Do you know, I have to confess, since my first time on the newscast where I got it wrong, and you so kindly pointed it out to me, I actually tape it on the side of my computer, old school. So I will never get it wrong again, to give you the satisfaction. And Bill Reel, how are you tonight?
As the guy who will always get the date wrong on the thumbnail, at least from time to time, I'm doing great.
You know, we're just happy to be here, and we're doing the best we can. We are going to start out a little differently today with a breaking story that Bill Reel is going to cover, and then we'll move into our normal broadcast.
Excellent. So, folks, we have some allegations of impropriety that started in a Lyft ride and then changed lanes over to TikTok. And so I will go to that story now, and we'll listen to a couple of TikTok videos where a ex-Mormon explains the situation.
Hi, I'm a Lyft driver in Utah, specifically the Salt Lake to Happy Valley area, and I had to fill out a Lyft safety report and a police report on this guy. Everybody say hi to Brian. To summarize it, he kept touching me. First it was just on my shoulder, then it was on my arm, and it was like little caresses, like, and then it was on my thigh, my bare upper thigh, because I'm wearing shorts because it's hot as balls. And I froze. That's why I didn't ask him to stop, because I just thought, surely this isn't happening. Surely he does not think it's okay to keep doing this. So I didn't say anything to him. I also didn't really react. My hands are at 10 and 2. I'm fucking driving, okay? I'm trying to concentrate on the road. I don't have time to be slapping people's hands away. At one point, he asked how old I was. I told him I was 33 years old, and he goes, "No way. I thought you were 19. That makes it like 1,000 fucking times worse, Brian. Why are you touching 19-year-old legs?" And unfortunately, the police are not going to be pressing charges because they don't believe anything criminal happened under the law, and I have no problem with them. They can only do so much, but they told me it was good that I filled out a report for documentation purposes, so no, the police are not coming to your door, Brian, okay? Calm down. It was very clear he's done something like this before, and it's very clear to me that he's probably gonna do it again. He gave me a really good tip, which just set off more red flags for me because he thinks he can just pay me off and hopefully I'll shut my mouth. But Brian picked the right one because he doesn't know I have a platform like I do. And it's a hobby of mine to call out creepy ass men like this. In trying to gather information for the police, I did end up texting him. And here's that conversation. I pretended that I had something to drop off to him so I could get his address. And then he said, "I'm sorry about earlier, and if you felt uncomfortable." I said, "Yes, dumbass." Except I didn't call him a dumbass. And then he said, "I'm truly sorry. I appreciate you saying something." And then I blocked him. And yes, he is Mormon. Because of course he is. It is Utah. I get a lot of LDS passengers. But I have never had a passenger behave so badly. I have had belligerently drunk people in my car. And they never touched me. They never made me feel unsafe. This dude who just got back on a mission with his wife made me feel so unsafe that with his generous tip money, I went ahead and ordered a dash cam and an internal camera for my car because I cannot afford to not have Lyft. It is my main source of income. I was driving in broad daylight. I did not think I had to worry about this shit happening to me. Anyways, tell your friends, tell your local Lyft drivers, and someone please tell her. Someone, please. There's no way that she would be completely shocked at this information. I'm sure something like this has happened before. Girl, you gotta stop letting him outside. He can't handle being in public. That's a public safety issue, okay? We gotta keep him inside until he learns the difference between his body and another person's body, okay? Bye, Brian. Hope you have a terrible day.
And I'll just add, like, so at that point, somebody in their side, somebody in their family, one of them reaches out and says something, mentions a lawyer. Go ahead, RFM.
Yeah, I just wanted to insert myself here. as a lawyer and just make it very clear that we are not at Mormon Newscast or any of us individually vouching for the accuracy and the authenticity of this allegation. However, it is an allegation that just came up. It does involve a Mormonism and a Mormon elder. I'm not exactly sure his position in the church. She's saying he came back from a mission with his wife. But we're putting it out there because this is the kind of stuff we cover. And having made it very clear, I think, beyond dispute, that we are not vouching for the credibility of this person or the accuracy of this allegation, we did want to put it out there and let you know that this allegation is being made.
Yeah, thank you. And the follow-up was they reached out to her and said something about getting legal representation involved. And so then she put out this second TikTok in response to that. So here.
I knew it was coming. Except if Brian happens to be watching this one, I would slow your roll there, cowboy, because your daughter has been incriminating you in my DMs. She pretty much did a speed run of every single victim-blaming tactic that has been used on me since I was a teenager when I was first assaulted. He's a nice guy. He's distraught. Blah, 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 blah. But I want y'all to take notice of him saying, and he will not be touching women's shoulders anymore. Oh, sweetie, that's not what happened, though. First, she calls you a creepy grandpa, which that doesn't help your case. And then she accuses me of lying about touching my thigh, and then says he is a shoulder arm toucher for sure. I've seen him do that hundreds of times. Also not helping your case. I truly was not planning on making another video until I found out that you were telling your family and friends that I am lying. I'm down to see this through till the end. I am tired. I am tired of guys like you bullying others with your money, with your power, with your status. And I didn't lie about anything. And I received another interesting DM from someone who has seen you do this kind of thing before. I know you have more victims out there, and I'm sure that they would love to come to court with me. Unless you don't want all that coming out too. Seek ye therapy. So this is for all of the people you have hurt in your life. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Bye, Brian.
So there's that. I'll say this again, allegations, and I'm not necessarily speaking to this specific instance. But I think that there's a lot of men out there who sort of think this kind of behavior is okay. It's good, right? And if it's not wanted, and if the person isn't somebody you know, it's probably not a good idea to do anything of the like. And yet here we have it. So again, allegations, but any thoughts from the two of you? And also I know there was some information on the person who's giving these allegations as well. So any thoughts from either of you?
I think my thought when I first saw the TikTok, and of course, we are not connected to the person who put out the TikTok, or nor do we know the person who, is alleged to have had this behavior. But I shared this with some friends of my age in the post-Mormon community, and we were all kind of chatting about, if you grow up in a certain era, and that would be me, a teenager in the 70s and 80s, this is what happened. The friendly squeeze on the shoulder, the arm around, the rub on the thigh, the pat on the forearm, maybe walking down the hall at church with the arm around you. And I understand that freezing concept. We were all kind of talking about this because you're like, I don't know what to do. Also, there's plausible deniability. If I make a big deal about this kindly person, second counselor in the bishopric or someone can say, I was just trying to be friendly. I was just trying to help you along. So you just don't do anything. But it does. And I also kind of think in that era, the men perhaps doing that, maybe on some level they understand it's not right. But on another level, it's kind of boys will be boys mentality, from the 50s, 60s, 70s. So, but it's definitely something that all of us experienced. I think that women today are more likely to go, hey, hands off, but back in the era when I was a teenager and a young woman in the 70s and 80s, you just sort of kind of went, okay. And I will say that it reminds me, do you guys remember that video of Elder Bednar and that young man that he was, it was that same response. Elder Bednar had his arms around him. He was rubbing his shoulder. Elder Bednar?
Elder Bednar.
Yes. Did I say it wrong? What did I call him?
I think you call him Elder Butnar.
I hope not. Sorry, it's been a long day. I probably need another sip of whatever's in this mug. Anyway, he he's grasping this young
Yes.
man to do an
Very
object
tightly,
lesson.
quite firmly from behind.
Very firmly, yeah. And he's kind of rubbing him and saying, "You okay?" And the kid, anybody that's had that experience before where somebody's touching, inappropriately like that, his eyes started to tear up. He froze. He could hardly speak. No one in the audience said anything because how awkward. And there's plausible deniability. I was just doing an object lesson, young man. Why are you getting so upset? So again, I think we all and when we saw this TikTok and heard those allegations, we thought we've all been there before, know someone who's been there before. And it's an interesting dialogue and conversation,
So, RFM?
Yeah, I've said my piece.
Okay.
I'll say it again. That we here at the Mormon Newscast, as a podcast, and Rebecca Biblioteca and Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel, we are not saying that this is true or that this happened. We're simply reporting the news that an allegation has been made. And we'll follow it if there's indeed anything more to follow up on.
For sure. Yeah,
Perfect.
for sure. All right, let's pull up the rest of our slides. And now let's discuss, as we said, this was really just breaking. We kind of popped it in there at the beginning of the show. So what we're going to cover tonight, the Lone Mountain Temple vote that happened last week, the MEG, consolidated class action lawsuit. I'm sure you can guess who's going to cover that. That's going to be RFM. New age breakdown, not new age, but new age breakdown for LDS singles ward. And Bill is going to handle that. And then I'm going to talk about missionary folklore and Twinkies. So I'm not exactly sure what our order we're in, but let's advance and see. Okay, the first thing we're going to go into the Lone Mountain Temple. It's been a long slog with this. We've reported on it many times on our individual podcasts, here on the newscast. It was finally up for final vote with the Vegas City Council. Now, this is the temple where, if you've been following it for months, there were campaign contributions made by the church's lawyer. There were, zoning implications. Were they changed? Were they not changed? LDS members were asked to write thousands of emails of support to the temple. They were told to show up at the plaza at the city meeting in blue shirts. They did that at the first meeting with the planning and zoning, and here they are again. You can see in their blue shirts. Well, it's finally all come to a head, and this is the night where the council is going to vote. Yes, go ahead. We approve everything, or nope, back to the drawing board. So let's play this little news story.
A new LDS temple is coming to the community of Lone Mountain. This after the Las Vegas City Council unanimously approved the project Wednesday.
Yes. They made the right decision, and time will, I think, tell for the opposition. They'll realize, hey, this was actually a good thing.
Eric Scholar and the more than 100 LDS church members who attended Wednesday's city council meeting were overjoyed about the decision to build the temple. But others are against the location, and they say they're disappointed in the city council's decision.
So that makes me feel like they decided this is what they wanted. Everyone in the community be damned. They will get their way.
It'll be over 70,000 square feet, and the property will include more than 500 parking spots. The majority of the temple itself will be around 65 feet tall, with the steeple just being adjusted from 216 feet down to 196 feet at the meeting Wednesday.
CFA has to be the final say, but in his expertise, under 200 feet would not require a blinking or steady red light at the top.
Many in opposition say that light was one of their main concerns, but they don't believe the city council addressed the rest of their issues.
Increased traffic to the temple site from the 215 Lone Mountain Road exit would make horseback riding unsafe for us.
LDS church members say they were seeking another place of worship near their homes, as there is a growing Mormon community in our valley.
It's going to be a wonderful addition to the area.
The city says with this approval, developers can move forward with this project immediately. Reporting from Las Vegas City Hall, I'm Ryan Ketchum.
Oh my, I love it how they characterize the neighbors as just being worried, I won't be able to ride my horse and I don't like blinking lights. As we all know, there's so much more to it than that. And, I did watch most of that city council meeting. I know that RFM watched it too. And I finally texted him and I said, I have to stop. I'm a very stoic person, but I was starting to get really sad for my friends and the residents, and just how there's no one there representing their interests at all. At one point during the council meeting, a councilwoman had 2 stacks next to her. One was a smaller stack of letters and it had the word opposition written in front of it. The other stack, 2 giant stacks of letters, and it said support. And she said, look, of course, look at all the support. Well, you never mentioned the letter that went out around the world telling people to send 15,000 or so emails. It just, I think RFM, you characterized the whole thing as a dog and pony show. Maybe you can address that a little bit, because I know you watched the whole meeting yourself, and I'm just too to talk about it.
Well, I'm anxious to see what a binky looks like on top of the temple.
A binky light.
A binky, yes. And I'm just glad they were in blue shirts and not brown shirts, because I understand that was the first choice. Then the church historian said, let's not do that. Okay, let's go with blue shirts. Anyway, the dog and pony show was it was a separate part of it. But throughout, it was very clear from what was being said by the city council members and the mayor that the fix was in and that this decision was going to be made. And then at the 11th hour, right before the vote, and after many, many hours of people expressing themselves for and against, I think it was the city council woman who was over this particular district, who all of a sudden now says, okay, I'm going to ask you to lower the height of the steeple to below 200 feet, because if it's at 200 feet or higher, we got to put a red blinking light, is what she was trying to say, on it for FAA requirements. And so then will you be willing to do that before we vote? And so then the lawyer, the blonde lawyer, went back and talked to her people for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I'm not sure, and then came back and said, yes, we'll do it. And okay, great. That's what I thought was the dog and pony show. And in the live chat, I said, did we just watch a dog and pony show?
Yeah.
Because I think that was scripted. I think that was political theater. I don't think there's any way that anybody in that meeting house had the ability and the authority to lower the height of the steeple 20 feet on that much notice. So those were my thoughts. But the people have been paid. They earned their money on the city council. They voted as they were asked to and paid to. And now the Lone Mountain Temple is going in.
Yeah, there it is. And you're absolutely right. And if you remember recently in Fairview, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, the church did come back with the McKinney Temple and said, we will lower it 15 feet and we'll change the name. The town of Fairview, unlike Vegas, said, no, that's not acceptable. And that meeting's coming up later. We'll talk about that. But in this case, I do believe it was a scripted thing where the council had to look like they were representing everyone in the community. So they had to find something that the church is willing to concede a little bit that they could ask for. And then it looked like exactly the scripted thing where, it was very dramatic. I thought, would you be willing to go down a few feet? The lawyer, let me check with my people. And as we all know, at all these meetings that we watch and cover, there is no decision maker there. Everyone says, oh, that's above my pay grade. That's above my pay grade. And all the councils and the residents that we work with say, well, who is the decision maker? Why do they never send anyone? So obviously that decision had been made ahead of time. From my perspective, they were willing to lower it, just like they offered to Fairview. And now it's going to be built. Bill, any thoughts on that before we move on to our next story?
Just one little one, which is, at least in this case, you really can buy anything in this world with money.
Good job. Thank you so much, Bill. That's what I was going to say. I said it in the live chat. I'm going to say it again now. The supreme irony is that they have now bought the votes of the city council people, allegedly, to get them to approve a temple. And the sacred ceremony, the primary sacred ceremony that happens in the temple, in the endowment, has the character of Satan say, you can get anything you want in this world for money. I think that is the ultimate irony of this.
Yeah.
And secret combinations. If you read the Book of Mormon and you want to know what secret combinations look like in 2024, you just watched it unfold. So there it is.
There it is. I'm telling you, we never thought we'd be watching so many town councils, city councils, but they're absolutely riveting. And I will quickly announce, we'll talk more about it at the end. But as I talked about Fairview with the McKinney Temple, their town council meeting is on August 6th. And I'm going to be down there on the ground. the newscast is going to, I probably literally will be on the ground because I'll be so nervous and worried. The newscast is going to be live streaming that. So everybody kind of put that on your calendar starting at 5 p.m. Mountain Time with pre-show. And we're going to watch what I like to call the little town that could, because this town has a different take. This town has a don't mess with Texas take. And it's something that all the other towns where these temple situations are happening, they're all watching, and they're just cheering because they realize that everything that's happening in Fairview is on the shoulders of everything that they have done before. So it's going to be a big deal. So, all right, let's move on to our next story. I think we have the Meg with RFM.
Before we move on to our next story, I think we really need to stop for a second and give you, Rebecca Biblioteca, a huge round of applause for all the work that you have done on this story in all the different temples. And you are the hub, the clearinghouse of information for anybody in these various communities across the country. It'll probably be across the world before long, who are having the church come in and use these kind of tactics to get a temple built in their town. So you are the one who deserves the credit here, I think.
Yeah. And my co-host Landon, the two of us were reached out to a year and a half ago by some people in Cody. They said, hey, can you help us understand Mormons? They're trying to build something and we don't understand what's happening. And it kind of took off from there.
Yes. Well, okay. I didn't want that to go unremarked upon.
Thank you.
All right. But we'll move on then. Okay. The Meg. Anybody actually see that movie? I did. Okay. I mean, I didn't see the
I'm like embarrassed.
I didn't vote for it a second time. I didn't see the second one, but I did watch the first one. Okay. Anyway, the Meg, because this is what it reminded me of, this consolidated class action suit, which has now been filed in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the federal court there. And there you got the Meg, that poster. I love that poster because up there at the top of the poster, that's your average tithe-paying Mormon, your faithful Mormon. And then you've got Jaws coming up after that faithful Mormon. And that's the church, okay? That's the church coming up after the faithful Mormon. And the Meg underneath it may end up being this consolidated class action suit, which is going to gobble up the church. So I thought this was a great poster. Having belabored that, let's get on to the story. By the way, I'm going to cover this in an abbreviated fashion. And by that, I mean compared to the hour-long dissection that Colby Reddish just did on Mormon stories with John DeLynn and Gerardo Sumano. He did a lot of detail in that, a lot of great research. I'll give an abbreviated version. Plus, I'm going to answer a question that a lot of people were asking in the live chat over there. I watched maybe most of it before coming on the show today. And it was a great refresher for me. So thanks so much, Colby. He did a great job there. But there's a question that keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, and I'm going to answer it at the end of this. So stay tuned. This is a collection of two different stories from the Salt Lake Tribune. The first one was in April 18th of this year. And they're both by Tony Simrod. And I took different pieces of the different stories and combined them together. Tithing lawsuits from 4 states against the LDS Church get transferred. Guess where? That's actually the title in a Salt Lake Tribune article. And a son of the late industrialist philanthropist John Huntsman Sr. and brother to former Utah government John Huntsman Jr., I think we all know who we're talking about, James Huntsman, seeks the return of $5 million in tithing, plus penalties and interest, but is not pursuing class action status. That's the first thing to know. I think it's clear, but this gets so confusing. There's been so many cases filed, and I think it's a great thing that a lot of these are going to be consolidated into one. The James Huntsman lawsuit is not going to be one of them. Okay. It doesn't appear to be. It's going to go on its own track. The 17.2 million member church and its legal supporters. Is that how it means it's lawyers, right? It's legal supporters. Okay. It's lawyers are mounting arguments in Huntsman's case that digging into aspects of tithing and the motivations of senior faith leaders in a courtroom risks violating religious protections under the U.S. Constitution. Yes, the lawyers for the church are actually arguing that you can't know what we have in our bank because that would violate the First Amendment. That is a ridiculous argument, and yet they're going to make it. The issue is being closely followed nationally, not least for its implications on the legal principles of religious autonomy and potential impact on a range of nonprofits relying on donations. I think that is true. This is a much watched case, and we're going to watch it closely as it moves forward in Salt Lake City. Huntsman, who resigned his church membership in 2020, sued the faith in March 2021. one. Okay, so that's that lawsuit. But in addition to that, 5 sets of plaintiffs in different states file similar claims in federal court. I think that one talked about 4. There's actually 5, and this is from the newer lawsuit. All right, so here are those 5 plaintiffs in these different lawsuits in these different states. I called them the Fantastic Five. In the bottom right, we have a picture of Gene Judson, who is the named plaintiff along with his wife in the one in California. That's number 5. But here they are. These are the cases that just got all wrapped together in one. Last October, Daniel Chappelle, a Virginia resident, and Mason Christensen and John Oakes, both from Utah, sued the church over a combined 350 large they had donated to the church over the past decade. So that's one plaintiff. Plaintiff and former church member Joel Long, a resident of Chesterfield, Missouri, is seeking $60,000. He says he paid in tithing while living in Metropolis, Illinois. And I think that one is filed in Metropolis, Illinois, because that's where he was when he paid it. Number 3, Kevin Risden, who lives in Kashmir, Washington. I know where that is. That's not too far away. Says in court documents he was active in the church from 1989 to 2016, and his suit also seeks recovery of about $60,000 in tithing. Number 4, Brandel Bronner is based in Gallatin, Tennessee, according to his legal challenge, and has filed suit over about $30,000 in tithing paid between 2003 and 2012. And then number 5, the most recent of the suits emerged in February in U.S. District Court in California. That's February of 2024, seeking a refund of $40,000 on behalf of Gene and Michelle Judson, a couple living in San Leandro near Oakland. So those are the 5 suits, the 5 lawsuits that were filed in separate courts throughout the country that are now being joined together and have been joined together in Utah. Okay. The 5-member judicial panel on multi-district litigation, a group that I've never heard of before, but it makes sense that they would exist. They are located in Washington, D.C. It is a panel that tries to make sure that situations like this don't happen, because it doesn't make any sense from a judicial point of view to have similar cases, especially similar class actions, going on in different districts of federal court throughout the country, when they would more appropriately be all put together in one. So this has to do with ideas of judicial economy, that these things take a lot of time. The judges are going to have to be going over a lot of information, doing a lot of hearings, and it's better for this to happen once than to happen 5 times with 5 different judges. So the panel called Utah the logical center of gravity for further court review of the disputes, as church headquarters and home to a host of relevant documents and witnesses. Plaintiffs in the 5 cases all allege that church leaders falsely claimed tithes paid by members were used only for charitable or humanitarian purposes, the DC panel wrote. That's the judicial panel on multi-district litigation. While instead allowing tithes to accumulate in investment accounts, hiding the extent of its wealth from church members, and spending tithing monies for commercial purposes. That is the gravamen of the complaints, or now the complaint. Centralizing the tithing cases, the DC panel wrote, will avoid duplicative discovery of evidence as the cases roll forward and prevent inconsistent pretrial rulings, because one judge isn't necessarily going to make the same pretrial ruling as another judge, including ones on First Amendment issues, the admissibility of experts offering testimony, and other issues. The consolidated case was assigned to Judge Robert Shelby. There's Judge Robert Shelby. The panel described Shelby, who is now Utah Court's chief judge, so he's the chief judge there of the district, as an experienced jurist with the ability and willingness to manage the proceedings efficiently. We are confident he will steer this matter on a prudent course. Shelby, who was appointed to the bench by then President Barack Obama, made headlines in December 2013 when he struck down Amendment 3 of the Utah Constitution, effectively legalizing same-sex marriage in the state, which was 2 years before Obergefell, I think it was decided by the United States Supreme Court, which effectively followed the same kind of reasoning as applied to the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that Judge Robert Shelby had already done in 2013. So there are a number of people who are concerned about the fact that all of these are being consolidated in Utah, the belly of the beast, and that this is somehow some kind of a conspiracy or plan on the part of the church to get a judge who's going to be favorably disposed to them. I don't know that that was their idea. I think that if that was that idea, this has failed spectacularly. This is not a judge who in any way seems to be favorably disposed toward the church and its arguments simply because it's the church making the arguments. Before we go on with this, does anybody have any comments?
No, I think you nailed it. He appears to be someone who will, if anything, be a little more liberal than the church, than sort of the opposite of the church's conservativeness on these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think we were all disheartened when we heard that first article. We're like, oh dear, oh no. But then as we learned more about the judge, we thought, well, maybe you're saying there's a chance.
All right, so let's continue. The Wisconsin native, Judge Shelby, also previously presided over at least one fraud case against the church brought in 2019 by former Latter-day Saint Laura Gaddy, a North Carolina resident. And that's the other case that's out there. There's the Huntsman case, there's a Gaddy case, and now there's these 5 other cases that are going to be lumped into the same case. In Utah, that suit, i.e. the Gaddy suit, alleges mail and wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duties, fraudulent concealment, and civil racketeering under the Federal Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, also known as RICO. It is currently pending before the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Utah. All right. And now from the article that was published in the Salt Lake Tribune on July 20th, 2024, titled New Class Action Case Over Tithing Could Lead to Millions Suing the LDS Church. So in April, they're reporting the fact that it's been consolidated now in Utah in front of Judge Shelby. And now what they're reporting is that the consolidated complaint has been filed in that case. So the sub headline is multiple complaints have been rolled into one mega case accusing the faith and its investment arm of using charitable donations to create a multi-billion-dollar slush fund. After being transferred this spring, that's the prior story, to a federal courtroom in Salt Lake City, the faith's global headquarters, 5 federal suits from across the nation have been formally reshaped into a single beefed-up class action complaint, clearing a new path for litigation before U.S. District Judge Robert Shelby. The newly consolidated case, filed July 12th, is being pressed by former or disaffected Latter-day Saints in Utah, Illinois, Washington, Tennessee, and California. A total of 9 plaintiffs so far are alleging that senior church leaders, and that's because there's multiple individuals in the plaintiffs of each of these suits, okay, so there's a total of 9, are alleging that senior church leaders and their money managers lied for decades about using member tithing donations solely for charitable causes, while instead investing the cash in a multi-billion-dollar slush fund at Ensign Peak Advisors, the faith's investment arm. The lawsuit accuses Ensign Peak and the church of fraud, unjust enrichment, and breaching fiduciary duties. Backers seek the return of varying amounts in individual donations they gave, ranging from $3,700 to $183,000 and change, along with other remedies, including possible creation of a national class of plaintiffs with similar interests. That's where everybody here should be especially interested, especially if you pay tithing to the church from 1998 up until, I'm not sure what the cutoff date is, until relatively recently, though. A legal roadmap issued for the class action case by Shelby calls for the church to file its counter arguments in September. So the complaint has already been filed. Now they're going to have to file their response, their answer to that complaint in September as part of a calendar of planned legal clashes stretching to year's end and beyond. So what Judge Shelby's done is he's given the calendar or the schedule for filings that have to be done, deadlines for both parties to meet. Shelby also told an array of at least 16 lawyers working on the case in late May that he would seek to keep its proceedings open and transparent. He said, "This is of great importance to a great many people," the judge said May 30th from the bench, adding that he was honored to preside over the matter. Now, that's significant because time and time again, what the church does when they have these kinds of cases is they make motions to the judge to seal records, to seal documents, to make them so that they're not publicly available because they don't want the public to know how much money they have and where they have it. It's the same issue that they've had all along that got them into this problem in the first place with the shell companies and the lies to the federal government, specifically the SEC. So this is something where what Judge Shelby seems to be signaling is he's not going to have any of that. This is going to proceed like any other case, and the church is not going to get any kind of special privileges of hiding things from the public. That's what he's indicating, and I hope that that will be true, and that the church will not be able to hide things from the public during the course of this litigation. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's the best part. Discovery and what they might be forced to reveal. I love that. Anything can happen. And my other thought is, and this is just from a completely layman point of view, very simplistic, but I see these lawsuits happening over the last few decades, and I see them changing and morphing and getting closer to the formula that's going to work. So decades ago, they were, Joseph Smith was a treasure digger. They lied to me about the doctrine. Well, that is never going to work in court, ever. The court would have to, I don't know, rule on the virgin birth. They're not going to insert themselves into religion or anything like that. So those kinds of claims that people made, I was lied to, I was deceived, the truth claims, not going to work. So then you kind of move along in time. Then you start talking about, well, their words were deceiving me, Hinckley and the tithing. But Hinckley didn't necessarily lie, depending on how you interpret it. So that doesn't necessarily work in court. They're really just getting down to the crux of it. What is going to work, this kind of pure analysis and ways that it really is going to stand up in court. So I just see them getting closer and closer.
I agree, absolutely. And the whole thing is, you're right, that the courts are not going to insert themselves into the virgin birth.
Well, when you put it that way.
I think that's what you said, actually. So
did I actually say that? No, I think I paused in between. So it
did.
didn't quite sound like that.
Yes, I brought them together. So the thing is this, they're not going to get into litigating religious beliefs, okay? Not going to do that. But just because you are a church or a religion doesn't mean that you can get away with fraud. And that's basically what's being alleged here, is that the church engaged in fraud. They solicited donations to the church by way of tithing with statements promising, or at least assuring those who gave them, that the tithing would be used in a certain way. The tithing was not used in the way that was promised, and therefore that's a breach of a fiduciary duty, and it's fraud. And I think that's the basis of the complaint. There's a number of things in it. It's a rather long complaint, but that's the meat of it, I think. Bill, do you have any comments?
I just want to go back to your slide 16, accusing the faith and its investment arm of using charitable donations to create a multi-billion-dollar slush fund. That's not really an accusation at this point, right? Like that's pretty much what the SEC essentially says they did, is that they used the faith and its investment arm of using charitable donations to create a multi-billion-dollar slush fund. Now, what is a slush fund? But the accusation is really whether it's illegal or not, the way they've done this and set this up. Are they allowed to take tithing, put it away for a rainy day, then never use it, and simply take the interest off of that and use it for whatever you want, and be allowed to say that's not tithing? And we're going to find out.
And all of that they can do. By the way, great point about that. This is not an allegation. This has been demonstrated by fact and by legal court order that the church signed off on when they were paying $5 million. $1 million from the church, $4 million from EPA to the SEC as a fine for their bad behavior. So you're right. That is something that is beyond just being an allegation at this point, I think. The second thing is everything you said. Yeah, a church can do all those things, but they can't lie about it. They can't tell you we're going to do one thing with this money and then do something different with it after you've given it to them based upon the assurances they gave you as to how they were going to handle the money.
Right.
So I think that's really the heart of it. And it's, I think that what they've done with the money, I don't hear a lot of argument about what they've done with the money. I think it's pretty darn clear that it goes into the slush fund, the EPA, and it never comes out. Yeah. Unless it's for those two things that we know about, which was to help out the City Creek Mall, as well as to prop up the failing insurance company, Beneficial Life, which are the two monies going out, the two big sums of money going out of the EPA that I'm aware of. I'm not sure I've heard anybody trying to make an argument. I'm talking about from the church's side that no, there's these other things that we did, and we sent it to the children's hospital, and we built, schools out of this or whatever. No, it's a slush fund. It's sitting there, and all it's doing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So,
can I note something else? Yeah.
Yeah.
I, as far as I know, the Perpetual Education Fund, if we all remember when President Hinckley
I do.
implemented the Perpetual Education Fund,
Mhm.
it was sold to members as you put your money in, and that money will then be loaned to very poor people who need to get an education and to help them along. And my best understanding is, by the way, for
Mhm.
folks who are out there putting these lawsuits together, is that the Perpetual Education Fund runs the same way. If you donate $20 and I donate $20 and Rebecca puts in $20, there's $60 in the fund. That money never goes anywhere.
Nope.
It's the interest off of that money that is loaned out to people. And then people continually, even up to this given moment, are donating to that fund. And there is a certain expiration date where that fund transfers over to the general fund. And what the church does then is collects all of the donations of members
Mhm.
to the Perpetual Education Fund when you thought you were giving it to people's education. And in reality, you just added to the $165 billion that the church has saved up, as far as I know, allegedly.
No, it's true. I can't tell you how disappointed I was to discover that that was the fact, because I was actually proud of the church. I remember where I was. I was actually in the foyer of the Stake Center. Yes, it's foyer, Rebecca. Do you have a problem
Well,
with
common
pronouncing words
usage is
correctly?
foyer. How do we argue about this all the time? Please comment. Would you, even though the correct use is foyer, isn't it better just to say foyer so you don't sound like that?
Yeah, it's always better to not be correct. Thank you, Rebecca.
Common
Okay.
usage.
So I was out there in the foyer, but I didn't have my futon with me to lie down. Rebecca
I
gives
can't
me
even
crap
podcast
over
with you
that too.
anymore. I'm sorry.
I know,
I'm done.
I'm sorry. So anyway, so in the foyer, and I'm listening to it piped out over the speaker, right? And I don't remember why I was out there. I had something going on, but I'm hearing President Hinckley talk about this Perpetual Education Fund and likening it to the Perpetual Immigration Fund under Brigham Young, which I hope was not as corrupt as this. But you know something? When I found out that people who donated to that fund, their money never went to help anybody. It sat in the fund, they invested it, and then they took the interest they earned off of the donations in the fund. It's a trust account. Okay. They take the interest and then using only the interest and never the principal, because the principal belongs to the church. Church isn't going to use anything of its principal to help anybody. I mean, what kind of church would do that? Even though it's not their
Without
money.
principles.
I know, and they've just
I
solicited
just
it
had
from
to
their.
say it.
And then to say, after we have solicited donations from our wealthy members or not so wealthy, anybody can line up and donate, and put it all in this pot, this trust, and then invest it. And we're going to keep all the principal. We're going to give loans for educational opportunities for members of the church who don't have necessarily the wherewithal to go to college or whatever it might be. They're going to give them those donations, but they're not donations. When the church gives it to them, they're loans. And they now are expected to pay back interest on the loans that the church is giving them that's based upon interest on money that was donated to them by other people. That is whacked. I was so disappointed. And actually, I was thinking of a different word than whacked. It almost rhymes with it. But it's like the LDS Church has taken financial corruption and raised it to an art form.
Yep.
So thanks for bringing that up, Bill.
There's precedence for that, though. I mean, there were funds in the early days of the church where a member would pay all of their money into the fund, and then they would borrow their own money back with interest. I mean, it's ridiculous what people put up with. Now, does the Perpetual Education Fund, it doesn't exist anymore, right? Or does it?
I don't know if it exists anymore.
I don't believe that it exists anymore. All I
It
know
just
is that
it went over and disappeared.
and disappeared. Well, so I've been thinking about that fund recently because a lot of you probably know that my mom passed away a couple weeks ago. And so she had written her own obituary because she's that kind of person. My dad passed away a couple months ago. He had done the same thing. Didn't leave much for me to do. Anyway, so I'm reading through her obituary and it says at the end, in lieu of flowers, please make a donation to the Perpetual Education Fund. And I have never been more happy than to cross those words off of the obituary.
I hope you substituted your name.
I tried to, believe me, but my relatives and my sister wouldn't let me. So no, but I don't think it exists anymore. So yeah, but in her wishes, because just like you, RFM, she was a scientist. My dad was a scientist. They valued education so much. And in their mind, they felt this was a way to help someone who might not have the advantage. I don't think they understood. In fact, I know they didn't understand everything you just described. I know that their entire life they invested and donated to all of those funds, thinking that they were helping people. So it just makes me really angry. Oh, look, here's Bill pulling it up.
So
Yeah.
last year, apparently.
Starting in 2023, church members who specified the Perpetual Education Fund as a donation recipient on their tithing and other offering slips were told that the fund no longer was accepting donations.
Yeah.
So it's moved over to the general fund.
Yeah.
They got to keep everything that was given to it.
Yep.
They
Yes.
got to loan out the interest, get the interest back, and get the interest on the interest, which is now making more interest on the interest on the interest on the principal.
Yes, and we don't even know if they even loaned out all of the interest.
Probably not.
Nope, this is scurrilous.
There's your
Okay.
LDS church, folks.
If we knew what that word meant, we would agree with you, RFM.
Google is your friend, Rebecca.
I
trust
By the
that.
way, do you want to tell us about that wonderful embroidery over your right shoulder?
This is true. My mom was an incredible seamstress, and she did so many embroideries all her life, like hundreds. So over the next couple of months, I'm going to be going through all my storage units. But this nice one I picked up, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to put it up here over my shoulder as I podcast. So as RFM made the point, your mom is finally watching your podcast because she didn't know anything about it.
You have an angel
I
on
guess
your
she does
shoulder.
now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Well, thank you for covering that. And yeah, I feel
I'm
like
not
maybe,
even done yet.
huh?
I'm not even done yet.
Oh, I didn't know you were
Bill
done.
raised the
Pardon
spectrum,
me.
the hideous specter, I might add, of the Perpetual Education Fund. And the last 10 minutes has just been an angry rant.
That's right.
And-
A little diversion into the funds.
Yes. Okay, so going on. Where was I? Probably at the top. Court documents show the new complaint draws heavily from the revelations of an IRS whistleblower in late 2019, David Nielsen, including his assertions to U.S. tax authorities about Ensign Peak's alleged penchant for secrecy as a massive hedge fund that never reinvests funds in church activities. Plaintiffs say they also expect additional withdrawals from Ensign Peak accounts for unrelated business items to come to light, based on the whistleblower's written assertions as discovery of new evidence in their case proceeds. So plaintiffs are saying, we're expecting to see new withdrawals from Ensign Peak for non-church related or non-charitable, non-humanitarian related activities to come to light. On the other hand, I don't know, maybe something else will come to light, like they were actually helping out people with something. But I just got a feeling that if they were, the church would have come out with that like years ago. That's my expectation. Okay, so we'll see what happens there. The refashioned suit also cites a February 2023 settlement between the church and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission over a complex scheme to evade public reporting requirements on Ensign Peak's huge portfolio by holding the investments in a series of shell accounts. The SEC fined Ensign Peak $4 million and the church $1 million as part of that settlement. Plaintiffs say that church leaders in Ensign Peak used the shell companies in part to avoid negative consequences in light of the size of the church's portfolio. They quote Roger Clark, Ensign Peak's CEO, as saying it sought anonymity on its investments so as not to deter some Latter-day Saints from continuing to pay tithing. Yeah, so he blabbed, and I'm really glad he did. I'm sure he's not glad he did, and I'm sure there's a lot of people at the head of the church who aren't glad he did. But he let the cat out of the bag, or as we say here on the Mormon Newscast, he let the monkey out of the box, because he admitted that what happened was going on. They're keeping it a secret because they're worried that if members know how much money the LDS Church actually has, they wouldn't pay tithing anymore. And that has all the elements right there, I think, of a fraud suit. The suit goes to great lengths to illustrate the church's public assurances throughout the years that the donations it solicits and collects via tithing or fast offerings are spent primarily on philanthropy including help for the poor and needy, education, missionary work, and other ecclesiastical ends. It includes repeated statements from church leaders to that effect, along with snapshots of church websites and even copies of tithing envelopes. Despite the church's representations to the contrary, and this is from the complaint, a substantial and significant amount of the donations it receives are not directed towards humanitarian aid, nor any other philanthropic or charitable purpose. Instead, they are transferred through a complex hub of entities to Ensign. Wow, the LDS Church using a complex hub of entities to hide its shady business and financial dealings. Who would have thought that? Can you say 13 shell companies? The suit includes diagrams, charts, and other references drawn from the 2019 report of the IRS whistleblower, former Ensign Peak portfolio manager David Nielsen. It also includes copies of a portion of a 2007 tax form on which Clark, Ensign Peak CEO, declared the book value of all the fund's assets at $1 million. When the suit says it was closer to $38 billion. On the same tax form filed in 2010, Clark declared, under penalty of perjury, by the way, that Ensign Peak's value was over $1 million. Plaintiffs label these declarations as part of making misrepresentations to the IRS to keep the trove a secret and failing to disclose its large-scale hoarding of donated funds. So many of the blocks of this lawsuit are already in place and have judicial or quasi-judicial orders and determinations having already been made. They have a lot of evidence on their side to show that this is what's been going on. And now all they have to do is to have the fraud, have the representations being made by the church and its representatives that the money would be used for charitable and humanitarian and philanthropic means, and then not have it used for that. And that's really the only link that they need. I think they've got a lot of statements that tend to show that. And I know that Colby went over those in detail in the Mormon Stories episode that just broadcast. So that is the end of the story. Do you have any comments? And I'll tell you, I got to answer the question because I kept watching people ask this question in the live chat when Colby was on. Okay. The question that people keep asking is this: how do I join this suit? Okay. I want to join this suit. I want to be a part of this class. Okay. The answer is, and pay attention, please, everybody, there is no class to join right now. Okay. So just hold on to your horses. This is the law. Okay. This is going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of time. And the first thing that has to happen in this lawsuit, of course, first off, the church is going to do their motions to dismiss. We'll see how those go. If they are not granted, and all or some of the claims, oh, there's my cute little monkey in the box.
Monkey in the box.
That looks like Judy. Judy the chimp. Okay. Anyway, so those who get it, get it. Those who have ears to hear will hear. You can't do anything yet. Okay. There is no class to join yet. That's what the first part of this lawsuit is about to determine what the scope is of the class. Now, we understand what it is the plaintiffs are asking for, but just because the plaintiffs are asking for it doesn't mean that that's going to be the class, because the other side gets to come in and argue about that as well. Ultimately, if the motions to dismiss are not granted, ultimately what's going to happen is that there will be a class, and that class will have a definition. And if you then fit into that class, then you can join the class. But right now it's premature to think about joining any class when there hasn't been a class that has been established. And, it's not going to be something that's going to be hard to find. How many people watch TV? I don't really have TV, but I used to have it, and I remember what it was like. And you'd be trying to watch something, and there'd always be these commercials, right? And there'd be these annoying long commercials about class action lawsuits. And if you fit into this class, then you need to contact this law firm, that kind of stuff. Yeah, we'll be seeing those on TV. We'll be reading about them in the newspaper. It's not something that's going to be done over here in a corner. Nobody's going to put this class action lawsuit in a corner. So try not to worry about that. But I'm certainly very interested in this because I know that I paid some tithing, and I paid it on the gross, baby, because I was righteous. Okay. I wanted those gross blessings. I wanted to have my fire insurance, fully paid up for when I needed the policy. And we'll just see how that goes, because if I fit in, I'm certainly planning on joining it. What do you think, Rebecca and Bill? Would you be joining it?
I never pegged you as a gross person. I was net all the way, but I still would like that back.
You're one of the
I
few
could
people
join.
that doesn't have me pegged as a gross person. Thank you. That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said about me.
I will just add, not only will you see commercials on TV, I would have to imagine the entire Mormon bloggernacle, Mormon Newscast included,
Yep.
Mormonish, Radio Free Mormon, Mormon Discussion, Mormonism Live, Mormon Stories, Nemo the Mormon. It goes on and on. I have a funny feeling it'll be shown in a few other places as well. So I think everybody who needs to know will have more than the normal class action opportunity to be aware that that is something that they should consider signing up for.
Yeah, I expect that at the church legal has gone to DEFCON 1 over this lawsuit, because
Yeah.
there's so much at stake. If they lose, then there can be up to, as it said in the headline, millions of people who want to join this class and are included in the class. And then it gets litigated, and eventually there's going to be a payout, and it would be sizable, I would expect. And I don't think the church is positioned where it can effectively file for bankruptcy.
Yeah. Wasn't it Neil Anderson that said that we are not a wealthy church? Well, that turned out to just not be true.
Well, maybe
be
yeah, be a
true.
profit.
It could be true in the future. That's right. Now, would people receiving their tithing funds back also receive interest? That's a question that I've been asked, and
They
I
made
don't
it.
exactly know the answer.
Possibly. I don't
Because
know.
that's what you have to think about. An investment like, say, a tithing of my parents paid in the, 50, 60, 70 years worth, where it could have been invested in a 401k or something. That's what you think about. So
Wouldn't that be nice if you got your money back plus their investment strategy and the interest they've been collecting?
this is what I'm asking.
There's
Yes, how
nobody
far
to
back?
there's nobody to manage my money better in those
Yeah.
instances than the
That's-
LDS Church.
That's what I'm saying. I would guess that somebody might try that. You know what I mean? Although, yeah. So, and I've also heard the thought having to do with temples that perhaps this huge increase in temple building is a way to try to park the money somewhere. Isn't that interesting? Because they see these suits coming, tithing, Boy Scouts, sexual abuse. I mean, it's everywhere. And it's a perfect storm. So I don't know. I guess maybe we talked about this, RFM. You would just have to sell a temple, right? If it came down to that, you couldn't really hide it there.
Right. I don't think so, because let's just say everything goes the way it goes. Let's say that there's a massive judgment that's entered on behalf of this massive class of plaintiffs against the LDS Church. I don't think the LDS Church can say, oh, I'm sorry, we're land poor. We just have all these temples and we don't have anything in the bank. I don't think that's an argument. I think the judgment is the judgment, and then the church has to pay up regardless of where they get the money from.
Wow. Crazy
Not a good
time.
look.
And we'll be watching. That's right. We will be watching. How long does that typically take? I mean, in your experience, a class action like that, to the point where people would start seeing ads on TV? Is it a couple years? Is it?
I'd say a couple years.
Okay.
It could be
All right.
1 year. It could be between
We'll be
1 and
watching.
2 years. That's my guess.
Okay. We will be watching and covering it, like Bill said, everywhere as it goes along. So, all right, let's move to our next story, which I think is Bill talking about singles wards and all kinds of changes there.
So the first article here, it was Deseret News. Church announces age range. Actually, this is the Mormon Newsroom. Church announces age range adjustments for young single adults, and the specifics of what they laid out in these changes. The age ranges for young single adult and single adult members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been adjusted, effective immediately. Young single adults now refers to unmarried Latter-day Saints, ages 18 to 35. It used to be 18 to 30, if I'm not mistaken, correct? So they've upped it, I think, 5 years.
I have no idea what it's been recently. I know when I was one of those, it was 26.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like they used to be a big gap like that, and then they kind of made it more specific, where it was like 18 to 25 or something, or 6 or something like that. And then I don't know. We probably should have looked that up ahead of
They
time. If
continue
anyone knows in the
to-
chat, let us know, because I feel like they have wiggled around on this for a while.
I think
And
they continue to increase the age limit for the young single adults.
Yeah. And with the term single adult now describing unmarried members ages 36 and older, where available, young single adult wards may include those ages 18 to 35, with single adult wards for those ages 36 to 45. Until now, young single adults referred to unmarried members 18 to 30, single adult referred to unmarried members 31 and older. So I think they had moved it maybe once before, and now they've moved it again. And in areas with many young single adults, particularly YSA stakes, leaders may consider recommending adjustments in units, such as a ward for members 18 to 25 and a separate ward for those ages 26 to 35. By the way, if you notice that last little paragraph sentence, it really does tip their hand at what the changes are about. In other words, if you're still really vibrant out there and you still have lots of people, you can still work by the old standard. But if you are doing what's happening in most of the church, you're going to have to widen those age ranges so that you have enough people to have a functioning operating program. And so you can see the reason they're behind it. Okay, another spot here said how recent age designation for young adults impacts Institute. In a talk during the April 2021 General Conference, the late President M. Russell Ballard, sorry, I want to give a little moment of silence there. Then
does that mean we don't have to listen to anything he says now?
No, he's not even worth a comic book or a collectible car at this point.
Yeah. So why are we quoting him?
Then acting president of the Q12 of the Apostles noted that more than half of adults in the church today are widowed, divorced, or not yet married. During the Church Educational System's Religious Educators Conference on June 18th, Brother Chad H. Webb explained how 5 or 6 years ago, after several years of decline in enrollment, the church surveyed more than 5,000 young adults from 5 continents. Based on the results, the Institute program has strived to make changes that better meet the needs of today's young adults. Institute's central purpose is to foster conversion, the personal connection to Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, including feeling their love and growing spiritually. No Heavenly Mother in this statement. The goal of conversion is supported through greater relevance, belonging, and accessibility. And it has working. And it has been, I think I'm missing a bend there. It has been working. Institute enrollment is growing. During the Religious Educators Conference, Brother Webb reported that after 5 years of decline, Institute has added 57,000 additional students in the past 2 years. That's a 20% increase. So there's that. So they went through 5 years of decline, did a bunch of research and surveys rather than needing any sort of prophet or prophetic counsel that sees around corners. And the research and the surveys told them what they needed to do, and they did it. And they're experiencing success. See what happens when you just skip the line of revelation and go right to the science and data.
It's also amazing what happens after a worldwide pandemic comes to an end in the past 2 years.
Yes, things get back on track, right? So there's that too. Maybe nothing special happened at all. And then the last article is the Salt Lake Tribune. There really wasn't much to this article, but they were asking if singles wards should vanish. And there were just a couple little nuggets from this. It said, the quote was, "When I take a step back and think celestial," don't forget to do that, folks, "singles wards make less and less sense for me on a spiritual level," Ingram writes. "I believe continually segregating members of the body of Christ based on marital status does more harm than good when it comes to building Zion." That's Aaliyah Ingram off of LDS Daily News site.
Can I just say to Ms. Ingram that she's really not thinking celestial? Because if you think celestial, you understand that the point of Institute is not spiritual and it's not conversion. It's to get these people married. That's what it's about. And you got to be married to go to the celestial kingdom. So if you're really thinking celestial, you'll understand we need to have these available bodies bumping up against each other on a regular basis at church so that they can end up getting married, sealed in the temple, and going to the celestial kingdom.
Do you know what people
and
who
procreating? That's a huge part of it. You've got to have faithful mother, faithful father, raising 6 faithful children. That's the only way.
Bumping up against each other.
You did say that, which made me think of procreating. So yeah, it's all part of it.
And you guys missed the biggest thing out of all of it. What you get out of people who go to the temple to get married for time and eternity, who have 6 or 7 kids, they will stay in the church forever and pay their tithing forever. That's what it comes down to.
And wear blue shirts to city council meetings.
Yes. It used to be, right? The blue shirts meant you were doing some self-abuse back at the house or something. So Yeah, that's people who wore colored shirts were less than worthy.
To church.
The good Mormons wear white shirts, and
That's
the
right.
priesthood holders in blue shirts, you know what they were doing over the weekend. So, all right. For older singles, though, Ingram suggests establishing, this was her recommendations, establishing regular, age-specific, and church-sponsored activities and programs, and dividing church classes and other, I thought it was a cool idea, by the way, other second-hour Sunday meetings where possible by age and marital status. So imagine a church that's divided a little differently. Again, sort of age, but not really anymore since you've combined elders and high priest. And but dividing people by age and marital status might shake things up a little different in the church in terms of who's in a class participating.
I think that's a good idea. And I think the second hour should be held outside the church in a lounge with some nice jazz music coming in lightly from the other room so that people can, get to know each other, have fun, and make it look more like Mormonism after dark.
There you go. A little plug.
They do that. They have sort of morphed to that, where there are activities, board games, things like that. They really are trying to make it more conducive to just meeting and hanging out. So I think they're trying. I think that shows, I think the only thing that would make them do something as extreme as that, to have more leisure, get to know you talking time than, doctrinal instruction, is that they're realizing, there's a marriage gap and perhaps a gender gap.
I would suggest to them that when it comes to effectively getting these kids, and I'll call them kids because I'm 64, to get married, preaching to them that they need to get married may not be as successful as just plugging in a little Barry White.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
There's a lot of other barriers to them getting married.
Yeah.
And the first one I want to note here is in this video.
We call those marriers.
Yeah, these are barriers to marriage. So these are the marriers. Here they are. Here's the first one.
A couple of real quick announcements. The numbers are in. There's 329 men and 654 women here. Refreshments
Why are they
in
laughing?
the South building. And if you'd like to help clean up, please meet over by the custodial. We need vacuuming.
So the rest of the clip was, and would the 654 women get on that vacuuming?
Yeah. I don't know how this all plays out. Again, you're talking about like being women's chores, but 329 men and 654 women. So if you have in that room, that was a young single adult conference of some sort, 654 women who would like to find an eternal companion. There are 329 single men available. So half of the women have no shot at all. Their only shot is to date outside the church, and very few of those will turn into an eternal marriage, and more than likely a bunch of them will turn into the female ending up out of the church. Those 329 men, some of them have their issues. What you end up seeing is that that's a room full of very little potential success happening. Finding people that are matches, getting people married. And when you have that much of a discrepancy, you're going to have a lot of people who feel like they can't quite find what the gospel has promised them. And so I just want to note that that's sort of sad. And as you guys pointed out, like, why are they laughing? That's not something to laugh at.
No.
It's sort of sad data. If you have a dream and your dream requires you finding the other gender to live a happy life in heaven. So folks, I think that the reason, and I think they've sort of said it, the reason for these opening up a little bit, the age space for your single adult groups in the younger, is to sort of provide more potential mates so that maybe a few more people can experience success in a church that is becoming largely females in the population and men making up a much smaller number.
Well, I remember you mentioned this before in a prior episode. Of course, I had to evoke Jan and Dean and Surf City, 2 girls for every boy. But could you play that clip again? Because not only do we have the ghost of Jan and Dean present and Dead Man's Curve, we've also got the ghost of Spencer W. Kimball present right over this guy's. He's basically in the embroidery, position over this guy's shoulder, like the embroidery is on your.
That's
your
right. On the
there,
shoulder,
Rebecca.
like a little
It's a-
devil or an angel right
I
there.
love it because he may look old and he may look like Spencer W. Kimball, but even he recognizes that this is a good thing if you're a guy. Look at his face. Watch his face.
Don't tell them the numbers. Don't tell them the numbers.
A couple real quick announcements. The numbers are in. There's 329 men and 654 women here. Refreshments are in the south building.
Yeah, you're getting one of those too, sir. Yes, someone's coming for you. That's right.
The field is white, all ready to harvest.
Well, and on the other side of that clip,
with this sickle.
Yeah.
What? I'm just quoting.
now
No,
the cat's going to go
Spencer
crazy.
Kimball.
Do not say that. No, the other side that you missed was Brad. On the other side of the clip is Brad Wilcox hugging a bunch of women and people that have come up. He spoke there to congratulate him. So.
Oh, I wish we had that clip too.
That was my clip and I cropped it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I should have left that part because that was good. So, but yeah, I think, I think that it is horrible not to let women in the church know what the actual numbers are, because you can't make a decision with consent about what you want to do with the rest of your life if you don't know those numbers. If you really think you have a good chance of meeting someone and marrying, then you're going to stay in. But if you understand how greatly the odds are against you, you might make a different decision. So I remember when I was, let's see, how old was I? I can't remember. Anyway, I had gone to some boyfriend's mission farewell because we were going to put him into the MTC. So I'd gone to California, visit, be with the family. It's going to be his farewell. And there was a wedding reception at the church there in his ward. And it was a returned missionary girl. She was about 24 by then. And she was having a marriage and reception in the gym because she was not marrying a member. And everybody was stunned because she knew better. She was a returned missionary. This is back in the 80s, and everybody was there, but they were whispering, she's marrying somebody who's not in the church, And I thought to myself, well, she is really old. She's 24. I was only, I think, 21 at the time and didn't know I wouldn't get married till I was 26. But yeah, everybody thought that was a terrible choice. And I went through the line and I'm like, this seems like a really nice guy. She seems really happy. Is there really anything wrong with that? He's obviously okay with things. He's getting married in her gym and having her reception in her gym with a basketball hoop. But in that era, it was a horrible thing that had happened. It was like a funeral. This woman knew better. She was a returned missionary and she was marrying a non-member. Whereas I feel that's a viable choice for people. Honestly, if you want to be married, you want to have children, you want to experience a family on this earth, as they say, I don't know.
If those stats hold up throughout the church, it's the only choice for half of those women.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it is. So I don't know. I feel the numbers, that whole hard cutoff. I don't know. Were you guys married before you had to go into any kind of singles scenario? Did you experience that at all? Singles?
I wasn't married until I was 26 years old. I was a menace to society. Okay, so you were in wards. Were you afraid of aging out? Did you face that pressure? It's very real and very detrimental to a lot of people when the clock is ticking, right? They're 25 in their singles ward that they love. They're the family home evening leader. They're the song leader. They're, Mr. Singles ward. And yet next year, tick, 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 they're going to be forced to leave, humiliated. They did not find a spouse. So somebody made a comment on this that I thought was a really good idea. So why don't we kind of morph it? Like say, have like a little gray area in between, like from age 18, to 30, when you turn about 28 to 31, you can decide, like kind of an area where it's not like, bon voyage party. It's like you on your own terms decide within this couple year period, I am going to phase myself into this or make these changes. So it's not so humiliating. I just think it's not very kind, I think. Well, a thought strikes me. First off, I think I was 25, so I wasn't that bad. Yeah, it was 85, so I was 25. But it does strike me that the church really comes down on people not focusing so much on their sexuality and labeling themselves according to sexuality labels. Instead, you're a child of God. Heterosexuals always been okay with the church, but you're a child of God first and foremost. And yet, when it comes to their young single adults and their single adults, they're doing exactly the same kind of thing, because the whole purpose is for these people to end up getting married and have sex and having little Mormons.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, hopefully people can make their own decisions, and even in that construct, find happiness and love if that's what they want, or if that's not what they want, something else. So
I'm feeling hungry for a Twinkie right now. Is there a reason for that, Rebecca?
Oh, stop. There might be a reason. Should we go to mine?
Oh, okay.
Let's do it. Okay. I am going to talk about LDS missionary folklore. And I want you guys to jump in with any of these stories and things in this article if you have anything to add or any similar story. So the article is called LDS Missionary Folklore Can Inspire, Illustrate, Terrify, and Sometimes Spread Sexism. So that can be true. These stories, whether true or not, often say more about the missionaries than the reported experience. And I think we all kind of can guess that. So the article talks to folklorist Christine Blythe, who is the executive director of the Mormon History Association, and her husband and fellow folklorist Christopher Blythe, author of Terrible Revolution, Latter-day Saints, and the American Apocalypse. And they discuss what they have learned from collecting all of these narratives. And they actually have a podcast together called Angels and Seer Stones.
Have you ever seen Rick and Morty?
Of course. Are you kidding? I had 3 boys. That's all I watched.
What would Morty look like when he grew up?
Oh.
Go back to the last slide, if you would.
Oh my God.
Because I think we have it right there.
Well, there you have it. All right. For those of you that don't know who Rick and Morty are, go ahead and look that up.
Expression. He's trying to look like him.
He is. The newscast is jumping the shark. All right, let's move ahead. Okay. So the article goes on to say that for few groups exist in the world like missionaries of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. More than 1 million of them have served in the church's history. So missionary stories are practically ubiquitous in the 194-year-old global faith, as soaring steeples, crying babies, and tiny sacrament cups. Some accounts are inspiring, some are scary, which odes to devilish humans and even Satan himself. Some are funny, and some are, well, tall on tale and short on truth. And
before you go on, Rebecca, something jumped out at me here, and this is actually serious.
Yeah.
Where's this story from?
Where's this story from?
Yes.
Oh, as we saw on the title page here, I'll go back to Salt Lake Tribune. Of course, it's our wonderful Peggy Fletcher Stack.
Thank you. So can you go back to that same slide you were on and notice what they're talking about? So missionary stories are, I know missionary stories. We told them as missionaries.
Exactly.
This is 40 years ago. But practically as ubiquitous as soaring temples.
Yes, I
Soaring
know.
temples is not a story that
it is now.
Peggy, you are in the tank. You're a hack.
Yeah,
You're
no, I
in the
caught that
tank
too.
for-
I'm like,
That's BS right there.
yep, way to slip that in there, because we all remember the soaring steeple stories from probably your missions and when I was a
absolutely.
young woman. So many of them, right?
Yeah.
Good
I'm
call.
Just
I
pointing
wasn't
that
gonna
out.
bring it
I'm
up.
just pointing that out.
No,
for-
I'm glad you did, because I read it too and kind of went, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm
Peggy.
telling you, they're going to add that into the religious lexicon wherever they can. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's move on. Okay. So, what is the difference between folklore and history? And these are just some questions that they're talking to the folklorists about. When somebody thinks about history, they're usually thinking about what really happened, hopefully. The set, the events, the time. Often in the past has been an emphasis on institutions. In folklore, we're less interested in institutions. We're more interested in people on the ground, and we don't really care whether it happened or not, right? Folklore. So
It sounds like church history to me.
I was going to say there's not much difference there. So this picture that I have here is Baba Yaga. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this story, but I told you I was raised in a very strange way. And this is one of my bedtime stories that terrified the shiz out of me for years. Evil witch hag, and she's got a house that has chicken legs. To this day, I'm still kind of afraid of Baba Yaga. But that was presented to me as folklore. And then, of course, all the church history that I learned, that was presented to me as history. So kind of interesting. What value do missionary stories have, both the real and the rumored? Because I think we would agree there are probably some of both, and it's kind of hard to tell. So a mission is a really special place here to have young people discovering their religion over time. They're immersed in their scriptures. They're immersed in talking about it. These stories tell us what they value, what they're concerned about, and what they love, what their hopes are. And sometimes rumor stories don't tell us what's really going on. They tell us what the internal life of young people are. So they express their hopes, their fears, their concerns, and those manifest themselves in these stories that seem to circulate everywhere. What is the danger of any if sharing these stories? And that's a good question. Ethnocentricity is something that we see a lot in LDS missionary folklore. Also, sexism. We have this story that's really popular, and you guys will have to tell me if you've heard. I've heard a similar story like this, but you'll have to tell me if you've heard this one. It's about sister missionaries in which they're out driving with the companion. The car breaks down. There's no gas station in sight. There's a bottle of water in the car, and they decide that the Lord can do miracles. So they say, let's pray over the bottle of water. It will turn into gasoline and we'll just go on their way. So they pour the water into the gas tank. And of course, it completely breaks down, totals the car. Now that's kind of humorous. And we have similar stories about elders who are driving vehicles. They make it from destination A to destination B. And when they arrive, they open up the car and the engine is missing from the vehicle. So the power of the priesthood was successful in getting them from point A to point B. But then we have the sister missionaries ignorant of, how bad it is to put water in a gas tank. And that's, more a cautionary tale, where the other story is one of priesthood power. Do you guys have any examples, or have you ever heard either of those stories before?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. The one about the water in the tank. No. But I have heard the second one, but that involves sister missionaries, not elders, where they're teaching somebody and they come out and there's some rough guys around their car and looking really blah, 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 yum, yum, yum. And they, scared to get in the car and then they drive off and you can imagine the shocked faces on these guys, because when they get to their apartment, for whatever reason, now there's got to be some reason that they open up the hood,
yes,
to check out what's going on, or they have the elders come over and the engine's missing because those bad guys back there had taken their engine out. Imagine the look on their face when these sister missionaries drove off in a car with no engine. Yeah, that's the version I heard.
Yep. Have you heard anything like that, Bill?
Yeah, I've heard those stories, but it would be quite a task for even 3 or 4 strong guys to take an engine out while they're standing around your car. So, and
it doesn't matter.
I know,
it doesn't matter.
But it's the point that Mormons and people in general, but Mormons, and Elder Holland, who will join us at the end of the show, Elder Holland, when he told his story about the brother who goes on a mission with the Doberman Pinschers, or maybe they were Rottweilers, or maybe they were German Shepherds, and that story had been told over and over. I mean, people eat it up when a whale of a tail. I forget what the gentleman's name was, but the general authority who gave a talk, he was a 70, and he told this story about the ship, and the story's just ridiculous. And you did an episode on it, and I had a little side help with that episode with you. And people are gullible, and we believe things. And anyway, I think we all can do better at not believing things that are absurd.
And I've got to tell you, when I heard that story the first time, I don't know if I believed it, but I didn't disbelieve it. And I wasn't critical enough in my thinking, or willing enough to apply my critical thinking skills to a faith promoting story. Why would you do that? You're pulling the rug out from under yourself. You're cutting off the branch on which you're sitting. But of course, we pulled the engine out and we stuck it in our back pocket so you didn't see when you came out to your car.
But it's one of those stories that gives you goosebumps. And when you're a missionary and you need those stories, you need to feel that there's a higher power, that's protecting you. Of course, you're going to, as you said, maybe not believe, but not completely disbelieve. There could be some truth to it. It makes you feel better.
But the one about the sister missionaries who went up to the serial killer's house and knocked on the door.
Yes. And behind them, yes, exactly.
Yes, and they finally catch the guy and say, well, why didn't you kill these sister missionaries? Well, I would have, except for the two big, what was it?
Lamanite warriors.
I don't know if the guy would say Lamanite warriors. I'm trying to figure, what would a serial killer describe these angelic beings who look like
angels?
Yeah.
With pecs out to here.
I would have said they were angels. But they didn't have wings.
Yeah.
So I didn't dare mess with them. No. And not only that, you've heard that story, right? But how does that also play into sister missionaries and elders feeling like they have this kind of protection?
Exactly. Yep.
And they don't need to worry or use their normal faculties when they're dealing with complete strangers that they're walking up and knocking on their door or advertising some gum and a message, and have somebody call and say, come on over and bring your gum and message.
And they're only teenagers or young adults anyway. So I don't mean this rudely, but they're not using their full faculties anyway. When you're a 19, 18, 20, 21-year-old person, you just haven't had life experience enough that you're going to make mistakes that I'm not going to make and the two of you aren't going to make anymore. And that's already bad enough. It's already, the odds are already against you that you're, again, no offense meant, this is all of us at that age, your naivete or your ignorance bites you in the ass a few times. And now you add to it belief in supernatural, where the supernatural never really happens. And now you're compounding a problem that your age has already started you off on the harder track.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we covered that last week too, when RFM talked about heretic. It's the very same kind of thing.
Yes.
So,
and I got to tell you really quick, this is just an example of it. I'm at the MTC. I'm in the Dan Jones building, whatever floor I was on. It's between the workday. It's between hitting the hay. You've got a few minutes, and we're hanging out basically in our garments in the area where you can talk. And a bunch of us are out there. And one of the missionaries, and I remember his name, he's a good guy, Elder Plant, with a silent E at the end. But he started talking about the 2,000 stripling warriors. That's a favorite story of yours from the Book of Mormon, I understand, Bill Reel.
I like it.
He was talking about how cool it would be for all of the missionaries to be drafted or inducted or join up in the World War II and just be walking, just walking through the battlefield with their helmets on and the strap loose, and just I don't think they had the cigar chomping in their mouth, but just with their machine guns, just boom, 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 just shooting everybody. And of course they're shooting back, but none of them can hit them because they're protected of God, because they're Mormon missionaries.
That won't go well, folks. If you
won't go well.
No, if you have all the faith in the world, you could have a bazillion mustard seeds worth of faith. And as many or more will die of you as science says will die of you. That's just what will happen. You will die on the battlefield. There's no way that thousands of you are walking out into gunfire and only a few of you are fainting from blood loss and nobody dies.
Well, we had not only the 2,000 stripling warriors at the time, which was 1979, November and December, but we also still knew that the stories that Paul H. Dunn told were true.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute too. So, all right, let's continue on. Here we go. There's some kind of loud lawnmower outside of my house. So I'm going to talk really loud. I have no idea what that is. Somebody said, is that a vacuum cleaner? Not here at my house. Okay. How has globalization adapted and altered the stories? That is a good question. Missionary narratives are reaching well across the globe, and it doesn't matter whether someone served in Nevada or Japan or Africa. They're hearing the same stories. The same legend is making its way to those countries and back. And so you have people from all over the world in other groups with other perspectives kind of chiming in and either adding to the narrative or criticizing that same narrative. So I think you do hear these stories coming from multiple different places. So Chris says, as a BYU professor, and you'll have to tell me if you've heard this story or versions of it. As a BYU professor teaching folklore, I had students always do a big project. Last semester, I had a student collect stories from different geographic locations across the world and told the story of a convert discovering a Book of Mormon with its cover ripped off. I'm guessing you guys have heard this. He reads this trashed books and then is converted. Then 10 years later, he meets the missionaries and immediately converts. Now, the original story is a real story. In fact, the part they don't tell you is that the book with the ripped off cover was a RLDS Book of Mormon, which is kind of funny. Yeah, interesting. But again, we hear this story over and over. It's been reset in Mexico and Brazil and Germany and other locations because it's so inspiring to missionaries. Who doesn't want to knock on the door and have someone say, I already believe everything you're about to tell me, and please just take me to the font. I mean, that would have been a dream, right?
Yes, absolutely. The original story was Italy, right?
Was what?
In Italy.
Yes, it was in Italy, correct. Yep, there have been
They had it
videos
in one
and
of the
documentaries.
church movies.
Yep.
that I saw.
Yep, absolutely. So that's an example of a story that's repurposed over and over. Oh, this happened in Japan. This happened in Brazil. You're right, because it's inspiring. Who doesn't want that to happen? So then they asked the folklorists that we're talking to here, what is one of your very favorite missionary stories? So this is one I had not heard. I'd heard kind of versions of this. Maybe you guys had heard it. So the story goes, there's a group of missionaries, typically elders, somewhere. It can be any state, any country in the world. Some subset of the elders decide they're going to form some kind of a secret society. Maybe they're Gadianton robbers, the bad guys in the Book of Mormon. Maybe they're the 12 apostates or whatever they decide to call themselves. They come up with initiation rites in which they invite others to join the group. Sometimes that includes leaving the mission field, taking photographs of where they've traveled to. It includes dating girls or hot tubbing with sister female missionaries in a baptismal font. These missionaries continue on their way, documenting in some kind of a book or a journal all of their naughty deeds. Have you guys heard this story or a variation of this?
Actually, I haven't, but it doesn't sound like a dream come true to me.
You're like, how can I get invited to this secret society? Gosh darn it.
Let's hot
Okay.
tub with the sister missionaries.
That's right. So here comes the good part. So one day, a general authority comes to the mission. Often this is an apostle. For a couple of decades, it's been Jeffrey R. Holland that shows up. So maybe he'll pass the torch at some point. It'll be Elder Bednar shows up. Somebody shows up. He comes in. He walks down the row of missionaries and he divides a set of missionaries to the right and a set of missionaries to the left. And he looks at the missionaries in the right and he says, good and faithful servants, go on your way. You're doing a great job. He looks at the missionaries on the left and he says, you're going home. Oh my gosh, terror and goosebumps, right?
Worse than death.
Yes, Elder Holland or whoever it is knows by the Holy Spirit who is part of the secret group. There are millions of different variations of the story that are told over everywhere in the world. It's always elders, and sisters are usually never part of this group. So have you guys ever heard stories where there's special discernment that can see into your heart and what you're doing, so you better shape up?
Yes.
I'm still wondering how you turn a baptismal font into a hot tub, you know? And
No idea.
I agree with you. I've heard those stories too, but we could always barely get our baptismal water warm. So
That was always
Not
the
quite the
challenge,
same.
wasn't it?
Yep.
Yes. Oh, I'll tell you what. Here's the story, okay, from my mission. It does not involve Elder Holland. It involves the mission president. And there's some missionary out there who has either picked up the habit of smoking while on his mission, or he carried it with him from, I don't know, the States or wherever he came from. So, you know, he's having the phone call with the mission president. I guess the mission president calls him. He's out there at the phone booth, which is something we used to have back when I was on my mission, right? And he's out there, you know, doing this thing. Hang on a second here. I'm just gonna use this one. So he's got his whole cigar thing going. Yeah, President, what's going on, man? Yeah, things are great here. And we don't have any visuals on our phones back in 1979, just so everybody knows. Okay, that's relatively recent to be able to actually see somebody when you're talking to them on the phone. And the mission president says, "Get that cigarette out of your mouth, elder." And the elder goes, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He says, I'm saying, get that cigarette out of your mouth, elder. So that's exactly the kind of thing. And we have to have those stories because we have to have this belief that our leaders, they're like Santa Claus. They know when we're naughty. They know when we're nice, so that we'll always be nice and we'll never be naughty. And if that's not a chiasmus, my name is Jack Frost.
And there it is. Again, these stories serve a purpose. They're not just random stories. They're crafted with a certain narrative because there's a need for that narrative. So okay, here we go. Why are there so many stories about missionaries who invite a battle with Satan? This is everywhere. My kids used to tell me these stories from their missions. It's kind of paradoxical. One of the most common stories is about a missionary who's doubting whether or not God exists or whether Satan exists, and he decides to pray to Satan. I don't know why, but that's what he does. And he's thrown from the wall, to the ceiling, to the floor. It gets really violent in these stories and bloody. And in that case, they become a cautionary tale about what not to do. And it reminds me of the story, and maybe you guys are more familiar with it. I think it was Sidney Rigdon that was in a room with Joseph Smith, and an evil spirit threw them all around. I mean, there are stories in church history about this, right? The same kind of thing. But in this case,
I think it's before Sidney Rigdon gets there, but I'm forgetting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I can't quite remember, but
It's the
somebody
first miracle in the church
room.
is the casting out of the
The casting out of
Satan.
the, yeah, exactly. And again, it's somebody that's doubting or not in line, and they just get thrown around by a power. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Had you guys ever heard anything like that?
I would look it up, except I inadvertently disconnected my keyboard.
Yeah,
from the
don't look
computer
it up.
by
We got
stretching my leg.
no. We got to let the viewers do something. You guys,
But I
look
did
it up.
hear
Tell
this.
us-
Absolutely. We had a story just like this on my mission. Are you kidding? Yeah, absolutely. This is totally true. Yeah,
Yeah.
missionary comes back. He's had a bad day, out
Yep.
tracting.
Yep.
He goes into the bathroom because he wants this all to be private. He goes in there, rah, rah, rah. Satan, I don't believe in you. There's such a Satan, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then it all goes kind of quiet. And then after a while, they go in there and because they're wondering what's keeping the missionary so long in the bathroom. Well, he's not there anymore. He's gone. And all that's remained of him is this mass of bubbling flesh on the ceiling of the bathroom. And that's all they ever found of this missionary.
Like
There's-
a little green globule on a
Newell
stool.
Knight
like a
in April
drummer.
1830. Thank you. Yes, Dan.
That's right.
Dan
Yes,
Vogel says Newell Knight. That's right.
Yeah, that's why I never look anything up. I know Dan Vogel's there, and I know that he'll do it. So.
We had
Thank
a
you, Dan.
young man in our ward, a little younger than me, maybe 4 or 5 years younger than me. And he came back from his mission. He was the person in the story. Like he's the one who got picked up by some unknown force and thrown against a wall. And I'm just going to tell you, like, I just don't believe it happened. I think he made it up. And what kind of person makes up stories about being picked up off the ground and thrown against walls by an unknown spirit,
Yeah,
Somebody who really would like some attention.
Yeah.
exactly. Or they make themselves believe it happened, or it's half a dream, half not. They convince themselves. It's important, right? To have, if you're so righteous that Satan is going to battle you, right? That says
Mhm.
something about you. So interesting. Then the last question is, why is the mission field so ripe with these kinds of stories always about Satan, right? The adversary. And it says, when we talk about demonic stories in general, it's usually where the cultures collide. LDS missionaries are getting sent out to foreign experiences where the cultures that they've been protected in is now coming up against other forces. There's a deep anxiety going on. They're being introduced to other religions, particularly charismatic religions. Latter-day Saints have been apt to think of them as diabolic. So we see a lot of these stories in Brazil, in South America, and the Caribbean, probably other places as well. In these stories, you'll find out that there's a formula they need to perform, that their priesthood or their endowment enabled them to conquer this. They're for people who are already anxious, already experiencing anxiety, and to hear a story of how they conquered it. These are really stories about Latter-day Saint strength. So that makes sense, right? It represents something else. And it always has the missionary, as long as they're doing what's right, and as long as they're following the rules, they overcome anything. So it's very reassuring. I think that's the purpose of it.
Yes, and the funny thing is that this story, which I don't know. I'm 19, I'm 20. I'm not hearing it from anybody who was actually there, but
Yeah.
they sure sound like they know what they're talking about. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I believe it. But the funny thing is that then you read about or hear about the early missionaries, 1837 to England, and I hadn't expected to talk about this. Was it Heber C. Kimball, who claims to see a vision of the hordes of the adversary marching across the wall of the room that they were in, like it's almost like a motion picture. Of course, they didn't have those, but it's being portrayed and seeing all these evil forces and snarling and everything. And I looked at that and thought, wow, this missionary story could be true because look, it really happened in England.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the story with the St. George Temple, right? Where they see all the adversary. There's a lot of stories like that. Everything's the adversary. Every time the church is blocked in something, it's the adversary. It has to be.
The adversary almost won in Lone Mountain. It was a close thing.
Almost. It was. Well, no, I think I told the story last, or maybe I told it on Mormonish, where there's even been a prophet who's like, yeah, stake centers, they go in with no problem. But when we try to put these temples in, the adversary, not the big ass steeple, but the adversary. So you have to spin it. All right. So all of these stories and some of the stories that you're sharing made me think of Elder Renlund. I don't know if you guys have run across this. Okay.
Yeah, he's the dilapidated dinghy guy.
Yep, there he is. That's right. Well, he offered the keynote address of the first ever Religious Educators Conference sponsored by the church educational system. And this was a month ago, but I thought that this was absolutely relevant, and it does have to do with Twinkies. So that was kind of fun.
Yay.
So in his address, Elder Renlund noted that a person who ate nothing but Twinkies, which is a snack consisting of vanilla cake and a soft cream center that is devoid of fiber, calcium, or vitamin A and C, would become, and these are his words, a constipated, osteoporotic, blind person with scurvy. It's not a pretty sight, Elder Renlund said. So I don't know if he's had experience of knowing somebody like this.
It sounds like a description of the captain of the dinghy.
It does. Anyway,
by the way, you're giving enough credit. Describing the church the way he did, he has described the church more accurately than any apostle or member of the first presidency in 180 years.
Yeah, he doesn't like Twinkies. He strikes me as more of a snowball kind of apostle.
Yeah, I think so too. Or a ding dong, maybe a ding dong.
No, that's over better.
So I just let's see, did I not read the rest of it? Yes. Okay. So here's his point, because it's a metaphor. In the same way that individuals physically need nutrient-rich foods, not Twinkies, students need to be spiritually nourished with the good word of God. Those nourished with spiritual Twinkies are unlikely to become unlikely to become lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ, he says. They are more likely instead to grow up to be spiritually stubborn, faithless, and bewildered. So if you don't get the meat of the gospel, if you're only given the spiritual Twinkies, you're not going to have a strong testimony. So here's my example of somebody that's only fed on Twinkies. And I have to say, I read through this. I actually had to go out. Like, I haven't had a Twinkie for years, but I love them. And I had to get some. So you know what I'll be doing after this. What?
Can I have one?
You can. I'll mail it to you. I feel like it might not be in the greatest condition.
It won't be in any different shape when it gets here than when you mail it.
That's I loved Twinkies when I was a kid, and
die number 5.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've talked a lot about how I was raised on food storage, and this is true. So when I would go to other people's homes who did have Hostess, oh my gosh, I was that kid that's like, they're like, "Do you want one, Rebecca?" I'm like, "Uh-huh." So yeah, I have a horrible sweet tooth because I was raised not eating any sweets. Terrible.
The funny thing is that Elder Renlund is drawing a distinction between the real fake stories that the church teaches versus the fake stories that are, I guess, promoting rumors.
You got it, because that's what we're going to talk about on the next slide as we wrap up here. But I had to look up the nutritional value of a Twinkie, and I have to say, Elder Renlund, it has iron, okay? A very small percentage, but it may not have any of those other nutrients that you mentioned, but it does have iron. So for women of a certain age, it's important to have more iron. So I'm just going to take that as carte blanche and eat as many Twinkies as I freaking want. Anyway, it's all about Twinkies. So now this idea of the spiritual Twinkie actually comes from President Holland, of course. He was always really good at spinning these kinds of stories. And he had said much earlier in 1998, when crisis comes in our life, the philosophies of man, interlaced with a few scriptures and poems, it just won't do it, Elder Holland says. Are we really nurturing our students in a way that will sustain them when the stresses of life appear, or are we giving them a kind of theological Twinkie? Again, exactly what you said, RFM, just something that's a fluffy story that isn't true, that doesn't mean anything.
The funny thing is, he's actually talking about the same Twinkie in 1998 that Elder Renlund was talking about recently.
Exactly. And think about 1998. That's kind of really early internet, right? They had no idea what kind of stresses were coming as far as people's testimonies.
And I've never heard a better description of a general conference talk than the philosophies of men interlaced with a few scriptures and poems.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. It's really funny that they're preaching against this, because I say, again, my little phrase, do not look at the mote, the beam. I can never get them mixed up. I always get them mixed up.
Twinkie in your eye.
Yes. That's right. Thank you. You always help me with that one. So, okay. So back to the Elder Renlund talk. As an example, Elder Renlund shared about inviting a family member, Grace, who was not a member, to a Christmas sacrament meeting program many years ago. As the stake president at the time, Elder Renlund sat on the stand while his wife and daughter sat with Grace. 2 speakers shared sentimental but fictitious Christmas stories. Probably the Christ birth, or maybe
what the heck is he talking about? Sentimental but fictitious. How does he know they're fictitious? And why doesn't he tell us so that we won't keep repeating these fictitious Christmas stories?
That's what I thought was really funny. Is it the virgin birth story, or is it, what are these sentimental fictitious stories that he's telling? Anyway, they're told from the stand. And the bishop, however, took 5 minutes to bear powerful testimony of Jesus Christ. So during the closing hymn, Grace leaned over to Sister Renlund and noted that when the bishop spoke, she felt something different, right? Not the Twinkie. You don't feel anything with the Twinkie.
No.
With the bishop's powerful words, you're going to feel something. So this is kind of the whole point of the Twinkie story. So as speakers have been well-meaning, but had served up theological Twinkies, spiritually empty calories, anemic expressions of faith and testimony that were devoid of the power of the Word of God and consequently of the Spirit, Elder Renlund said. Noting that it is difficult for the Spirit to bear witness of a fictitious story. I had to put that in red.
I know. You think the Spirit had a lot of practice at that by now.
I know. I just, honestly, you have to read this like this. It is difficult for the Spirit to bear witness using a fictitious story. Elder Renlund reminds teachers of the need to always bring their instruction back to Jesus Christ and his atonement, Heavenly Father and his plan, and the restoration of the gospel. Of course, and here's the part that I literally couldn't believe I was reading. Of course, it is fine to use stories, even fictitious ones, to grab the attention of the students. But once we have their attention, we then need to deliver the nourishment that changes lives. So that's the whole idea. It's totally okay to use a fictitious story. Do you ever tell your students that the story was fictitious? Do you ever tell people that Paul H. Dunn's stories were fictitious? Or perhaps resurrecting a gnat might have been an exaggeration? Or, I mean, we could go on for an hour talking about the exaggerated or fictitious stories that are used in conference, the upper echelon of church instruction. What do either of you think about that
This
statement?
very page.
Yeah.
This very page. I think Hostess has a lawsuit against the church.
I feel like maybe. I think they're disparaging the good name of Twinkies, and I think Twinkies have more integrity than some of the things we hear in conference. There, I said it.
It is difficult for the Spirit to bear witness of a fictitious story. If there's anything, even the believer at this point would have to acknowledge that almost 200 years of Mormonism has clearly shown that it is not much of a problem at all for the Spirit to bear witness of fictitious stories. We review enough of them in the content we create. Elder Holland and President Nelson make up about 7 or 8 of those stories alone.
Yeah,
That
the
Spirit
spiral
had
of
no
death,
problem
right?
with.
The
Yeah.
airplane, spiral of death, that came to
Yeah.
mind. Or just a fluffy story, the water bottle crushing. I mean, where was the nutrients in that?
I don't know why they have so much trouble with Twinkies, because Twinkies and journal authorities have one thing in common, and that is that their shelf life is just about as long.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. So anyway, the bottom line, I think, is that, these stories, the fictitious stories, they do have a purpose. I mean, everybody uses them, not just people in the church, but I feel like in the church, people are expected to believe them completely. I saw the gold plates. Oh, okay. It was as if I was looking through a mountain, but I saw them, right? And a lot hinges on this. A lot rides on this. You
Who
need
was
to
it who said
realize
that?
that these are
Was it Martin Harris who said that he saw the plates as if he saw a
as if
Twinkie
you saw
through a
through a
mountain?
mountain.
A
Yeah,
Twinkie
all of
through a
them were
mountain?
having visions,
A
egged on by
Twinkie through a
Joseph.
mountain, Rebecca.
Huh?
He said
I
he saw the
Yes,
plates
as
as
if
if he
through a
saw
mountain.
a Twinkie through a mountain.
Oh, a Twinkie through a mountain.
Okay.
I
There
like
we go.
that. Anyway, I think we've covered that enough unless you have any other thoughts.
I
think
added a
just
slide. I added a slide to
Oh,
yours. I
good.
didn't tell you. I didn't know if you would see it.
Well, let me put it
Okay,
You're
this
just-
is the
am I-
scene. This is the scene.
We're not going to play this, are we? I'm a little
Yeah,
afraid.
yeah. Absolutely.
No.
No, play it. Absolutely.
No, we're just
Well,
gonna look at it.
I will tell you right now, this will get us non-monetized for at
No,
least a few
we're
minutes.
not gonna play it. We're just gonna look at it.
Well,
There
let's
it
play
is.
it.
Let everybody who watches live, they can watch this. This is the perfect
We'll
scene.
cut it out after.
Yeah. I can't hear anything.
Well, let's say this Twinkie represents the normal amount of psychokinetic energy in the New York area. According to this morning's sample, it would be a Twinkie 35 feet long, weighing approximately 600 pounds.
That's a big Twinkie.
We could be on the verge of a fourfold cross rip, a PKE surge of incredible, even dangerous proportions.
We just had a visit from the Environmental Protection Agency. How's the grid holding up?
It's not good.
Tell them about the Twinkie. What about the Twinkie?
One of the best scenes in a truly great movie.
I'm telling you, Twinkies are really good. I haven't had them for a while. I can't talk now because my mouth is full, but we better close the show. So I think we've done it. Have we covered everything we wanted to cover?
I don't know. I think our audience would like to see you sing some kind of a song right now.
A Twinkie song? I don't think
Any
so.
kind of song with a Twinkie. in your mouth.
Twinkie, little
Little star.
star.
Now we really are jumping the shark. I'm taking control. I'm ending the show. All right. Let's quickly go over anything that you guys have coming up that anybody might want to view. RFM, what is going on?
We have something very important going on Wednesday, which is really Bill's creation. I want to let him address it. You and I and maybe Landon will be recording something top secret tomorrow night.
Yep.
A huge story that you've stumbled upon, Nancy, Drew, again. And that will hopefully premiere on Thursday, maybe
Thursday night. Yep.
evening.
Yep.
It's going
that
to
will
be huge. It's going to be
Yep.
big. It's going to be fantastic. And I'll be along for the ride. But Wednesday's going to be something really amazing too. And it has to do with little baby Buddha feet.
I'll just say this first, which is I got a little inkling of what you two are about to get into that's going to show on Thursday. And I think folks ought to tune in and watch that. I won't spill the beans, and I'll let you guys break that. But I'm excited to hear you guys do that podcast. Wednesday night, I have been doing some research on all of the seer stones that are connected to Mormonism. And I think most of us know these stories. You know, there's Sally Chase's green stone and Joseph Smith's first white stone, and there's the egg-shaped stone. But there are 5 or 6 other seer stones that are mentioned in Mormonism. We'll talk about those. But what I thought was the coolest thing, and I won't get into it here, although the thumbnail's a bit of a tip, and you mentioned the Buddha's foot. There's going to be, I think, things that we talk about Wednesday night that I didn't know prior to this, and you didn't know RFM prior to this. And normally, if you don't know it and I don't know it, then about 99% of Mormons don't know it. And so I'll be interested to see how the crowd reacts, the listeners react to Wednesday night show. But we'll talk about Joseph Smith seer stones and other seer stones within Mormonism. So that's Wednesday night.
It's like no rock in upstate New York was safe from being added to Joseph Smith's seer stone collection.
He even took a couple off the beach. The 2 of his seer stones that we'll mention, he just found on the beach one day, just 2 rocks that were sitting on top of the sand and looked a little different, and put those in his pocket and called them seer stones.
I mean, I get the impulse. I had a rock collection when I was a kid. I'd go out and look for rocks and put them in this little Folgers can, the coffee can, right? And then later on, I got a rock tumbler and everything and polished them up, made them look real nice.
Yeah.
My only problem was I never stuck one in a hat and tried to translate anything. I never thought of that.
I feel like you might have picked up a Twinkie and said, I think I can see something in that.
And while the trick is to put a rock in a hat, we'll find that Sally Chase did something sort of stranger than that with her seer stone. So we'll find that out Wednesday night as well.
Wow.
Where did Sally Chase put her seer stone? That's
that's a whole nother story. This is a good week of viewing because I have to say,
not her female pocket.
No.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to have to cut you guys off. I'm going to have to cut you guys off so that I can end on a note of decorum. No. So Mormonish on Tuesday has our normal episode time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and we're going to talk about how to dissect a truth claim. And we're going to use it against the Anton characters. So that should be really interesting. And then as RFM said, we have an episode on Thursday night, kind of a special edition. He graciously kind of said, take my time spot since he's going to be on with this. But yeah, you're definitely going to want to tune in on Thursday. So look for those. And I think that's it. So thank you.
Is Keith Erickson helping you out? Keith Erickson, isn't he's the hoax expert in the church?
Yeah, no, that would be an interesting one. So actually this guest, another person we discovered, he is a linguist. And this is going to be fascinating because his job was to create the Romulan language for all of the Star Trek series that are out there right now. Like on Paramount, he's a linguist and he created seriously, I just ran into this person.
Don't go there, Bill. Okay, I'm just saying, don't go there.
No. You know how I am about Star Trek, but literally he created the Romulan language. I mean, I told you my mom speaks Klingon. I kind of learned it a little when I was a kid. I know I'm geeked out of my mind, but this guy's the real deal, creating the Romulan language. If you can create the Romulan language for Paramount, you can debunk the Anton characters.
You can be on Mormonish.
You can be on Mormonish. That's right. Anybody can with anything to do with Star Trek. Anyway, and then one last little note again, we talked about it at the top of the show. Please put a note on your calendar for August 6th, because we are going to be live streaming Fairview Town Council deciding if they're going to allow or say no just say no to the McKinney Temple. So,
And that's
all
a real
right.
horse race.
It really is. This is going to be a really important meeting and full of drama. Yep, there it is. Bill made an amazing thumbnail. LDS Church versus Fairview, Texas. And we'll start that at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. I'll be on the ground with my co-host on my other show. Landon will be interviewing some people, talking to some people, getting a feel for what's going on, and then we'll be in the meeting. So you can watch it here. So, all right. Well, thank you, RFM. Thank you, Bill Reel. We will catch everybody next week, same day, same time, Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.
Elder Jeffrey Giles Holland here. That's a wrap for this week's of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. And remember, don't be a taffy puller.